Hey guys, welcome back. So on our bracket for our mechanical fuel pump, we needed this bolt to be like a pivot bolt. So basically the bolt needs to be tight with the hole, but these two are going to be loose and it'll pivot about that bolt right there. So here's how we're doing it. So this bore is a 1/2 inch bore. And what I did was I have a piece of 1/2 inch tubing. I just kind of sanded it and deburred it and cleaned it up, which I'll probably grease it in a minute. But this fits in here decent. It won't go all the way there. If I put it from this side, it'll mostly go in just by hand. Yeah, see what I mean? So we'll clean that up a little bit, grease it, and we're going to pop that in there. But that doesn't get us down to the bolt size, because this is the bolt we're using. This threads into the Mazda block, and it's kind of loose. So what I did was I found another piece of tubing from this copper, and after sanding and drilling on it, it slips right over the bolt, and this slips into this tube. And it's got a little bit of clearance, but it's not much. It's pretty tight. Tight enough. So that's going to be our pivot system. So we're just going to get this final cleaned. We're going to grease it because I don't want any of this to rust. We'll press it into this bracket, and then we'll be one step closer. After that, we've got a couple of bolts. We've got to grind the links on them to get them right, and then we're going to bolt this pump up and see how it looks. All right, guys. So we're not batting 1,000 quite yet, but we're close. So check it out. We'll start off with the bad part. Hopefully this shows up on video. If you're thinking, wow, that belt looks a little crooked, you'd be correct. So I was able to install all this, sort of. That pulley's like slamming up against the pump, and the pulley needs to go that way, this bottom pulley. This whole pump is like in the wrong spot. I haven't figured out yet. My gut feeling says that I marked something on the edge of the pulley instead of the center of the pulley or something like that, because this was supposed to be, by design, barely poking out here just a little bit. And I knew when I did that, I was like, hey, maybe I should design this with it hanging out more. And I was like, you know what, I could measure stuff right. So let's just keep that pulley close to the bearing. It's more reliable that way. But we screwed up. Now the good news is I think I can fix this. And there's also other good news. A lot of the other stuff is working as intended, so that's why I went ahead and put it together, even though it's never going to run being crooked like this. And hopefully I'll rotate this. Maybe it'll be more obvious. Yeah, you can kind of see coming off crooked on that pulley. Hopefully it shows up there. Anyway, all messed up. But anyway, some of the stuff's working. So our belt, we expected to use a 485 belt. That seems to be the correct length, so that's nice. And I do have a belt longer and 2 belts shorter than this. One of the downsides is installing the belt isn't easy, which I thought it might be, but it turns out I have such small range of adjustment that it's hard to install the belt. What I had to do was loosen these 3 bolts, have the mandrel kind of flopping around, get the belt over this edge, and then at that point the belt was actually loose and I was able to tension it. And I'll show you guys how this works. It's pretty simple. I don't have all the belts torqued. I'm just going to loosen this bolt and then loosen this bolt. There we go. And now, as you can see, belt's all loose. And this does what I expected. So when I lift here, if you note, that top bolt doesn't really move much. It moves a little because there's a tiny bit of slack, but not much. Most of the, it's pretty much pivoting off of that, which is what we were going for. I'll pop this mandrel off and you'll really be able to see what I'm talking about. Here we go. Yeah, as you can see, not a lot, but that's all it takes to tension the belt. So that part of the design is working. Another critical aspect is the dimensions of these mounting bosses, which I had them tight a second ago, but let's snug these back up. I don't have the bottom one tight, just because it has a nut on the back side, but that bolt length worked out. So all of my bolt lengths are actually good. I didn't even grind. Well, this bolt wasn't. As you can see, I threw some washers on it. But this bolt, I can't grind it to fix it. I gotta attempt to find a bolt that's the correct length. So that's kind of annoying, but we'll figure that out. So the tensioning mechanism works. The clearance, there's not a ton of clearance, but there is clearance for that tooth wheel. So we're good there. So, and then there's, this back here has plenty of room, like plenty. So a lot of stuff worked out. One thing I did note, this gap between here and here, it's not quite perfect. I haven't figured out the cause of that yet. It's hard to photo. It doesn't really show up. But that pump is not 100% like right up against it. Maybe right there. You might can see some light behind it or something. I don't know. It's kind of hard to show up. But that didn't quite fit right. We got to figure that out. We're not sure the cause of that. But anyway, the good news is I think I can save this. The bad news is this is the part that we should really change. You could make the mandrel longer, but I don't want to do that because then it's just hanging off the crank nose more. That's really not the correct thing to do. The correct thing is to move all of this back that way, which will make it lighter too and more rigid. So what we're probably going to do is figure out some way to clamp on this in the milling machine and then write a program that basically skims this face, and this face the correct amount. Now, admittedly, that's going to be a giant pain in the butt to figure out how to do that. I'm probably going to have to, I'm just thinking this through, probably going to have to clamp this flat on something where I can get like a line set up and set my axis system off of that. I don't know. Got to think about that. But I think we can save it if we do that, because I could say, for example, I don't know the number, but let's just say this is a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch or whatever. Once it's set up, I can just skim that distance off of all three of these, and they'll still be the, the same proportions. So we should be able to save it. Worst case, I can get a new one made, but I don't think that'll be necessary unless I just screw up on the repair. So overall, it's pretty good, but we did not bat 1,000, not on this part. That's okay. It's kind of complicated to model all, or to me, it's kind of hard to do all of this and get everything right the very first time without just spending a ton of time on it, and I didn't want to do that. I needed to get this knocked out. So anyway, that's our thing. We're gonna take some measurements, try to figure out the exact distance. Like, say if we set that pulley, you know, about 1/8 of an inch off of that, and then we'll measure our mandrel. I'll get a straight edge on this and a caliper and get an exact measurement of how much that pump needs to go this way, and go from there. But happens. But overall, I'm still pretty happy. I'll tell you what, it looks badass having this thing installed. It's cool seeing a mechanical pump, and I know these washers don't look good. We'll get that fixed. Probably come up with something a little bit better than that. But I think it's gonna look badass when it's all finished. Be cool seeing a Mazda BP with a big old mechanical fuel pump. And I'm sure you guys have noticed this, but some guys, what they'll do on Evos, 2Js, things like that, when they're doing like to me, like a cheap build or something, what they'll do is they'll put the pump driven off of like a cam gear, because the cam gear already has a 2-to-1 reduction, so you can drive right off of it. But the downside is you move the pump way up at the top of the motor instead of the bottom of the motor. And I need my fuel cell, in a perfect world, you want the fuel to gravity feed to the pump. Whereas if you put a pump way up here, you know, now you're forcing the pump to lift fuel, which is not good practice. So I'm glad to have it down here, and especially considering my intake manifold's right here and my fuel rail's going to be right here. So that's just going to go, you know, that's going to be great. That's going to be awesome. And then we'll just put our regulator somewhere back there and then loop it back to the fuel cell. So overall, doing the custom bracket's going to pay off. But it looks like we're going to have to take a round two, at least adjusting and machining to save this part. But I think it's going to work. So anyway, hope y'all like that, and let me know what y'all think, you know. Were y'all thinking that I should have got this right the first time, or, you know, is this forgivable? But, all right, hope y'all have a good one, and until next time, y'all take it easy. All right, so we took a 1/8 inch spacer, threw it between the pulley and the pump to give us a little bit of 1/8 inch of wiggle room in that direction. Clamped a straight edge up. As you can see, the front of that pulley and the front of that pulley are not the same. Threw a caliper in here, got our measurement. Here's the number, 0.475. Basically half the distance from the here to here. So somewhere I marked the front of an edge instead of the middle of an edge, and that's what went wrong. Not the end of the world. Luckily, I think I can fix this. It is frustrating. But if there was gonna be a mistake, at least if I'd made the bracket too short in this direction, I guess you could put washers or something, but that would look not professional. So at least this way I should be able to machine these posts about 0.475 shorter. And then it'll bolt right up and just look like it does now, except it'll hopefully line up. And like I said, I got a spacer in here, so that'll leave the pulley, like as you see down here, give you an 1/8 inch gap, which will leave a tiny bit of wiggle room that way and plenty of wiggle room this way. So I think we can fix this. Rest of it's looking good. So I guess the next steps is think about how I'm going to hold this in the mill. I didn't really design this to be clamped on after it was made. Didn't expect that to be a problem, so we'll figure it out. I think I'm just going to have to lay it down flat and clamp it with like toe clamps and all that jazz. Not fun, but doable. So anyway, not the end of the world. And looks like I can save it. All right, guys, take it easy.